Now, how to do the determination of fair market value in case of unquoted shares? So, as regards the quoted share, there is no challenge. Quoted shares हैं. So you only have to refer the quoted price of the shares of those company on the valuation date. In case if there was no trading or in that shares of in the shares of that company on the valuation date, then you can refer the previous the quoted price of the previous day when the trading was done, and that is how you can determine the fair market value of a quoted share or of a quoted security. Now, the question is, how do you do the determination of fair market value in respect of unquoted shares? And this is a very common problem in the context of the shares of unlisted company and also the shares of private limited company, because private limited company in any case are not authorized to be listed on a stock exchange. So for the purpose of determination of fair market value of unquoted share, what we have is rule 11 U A sub rule 1 small c. So rule 11 U A sub rule 1 small c, and this rule talks about determination of fair market value of unquoted shares. So the methodology which is prescribed under rule 11 UA1C is based on the balance sheet. So there is a formula which is given in the rule 11 UA under rule sub rule 1 small c and thereafter small b. The formula is given and which is based on the balance sheet, and the formula is A plus B plus C plus D minus L into PV divided by the PE. Now let us understand as to what is the full form of all these terms used in this formula for determination of fair market value in case of unquoted share. Now, before we move forward and look at all these values, what does A stand for, what does B stand for, what does C stands for, what does D stand for, and what does L stand for, and what does PB and P stand for. Before we delve into that, remember who can do the evaluation in case of unquoted share following rule 11 UA1 small c small b. Since this valuation is based on the balance sheet and therefore external report not necessary but recommended. तो सीधी सी बात है, ये जो NAV जो this is also referred as net asset value method. Now since this net asset value method is based on the numbers which are given in the balance sheet, therefore really speaking there is no necessity of obtaining any valuation from anyone outside. But we will see that there are certain aspects in this formula which needs to be confirmed professionally by someone who is a professional valuer, and therefore even though there is no mandatory requirement of having anybody's valuation report, it is always recommended to obtain such a report from a chartered accountant. So let us understand now the meaning of A, B, C, D and minus L. So this is your formula as we have seen: A plus B plus C plus D minus L into PV upon PE for the purpose of valuation of unquoted equity share. Now in this case, A stands for book value of all the assets. Book value of all the assets as given in the balance sheet of a company, other than, and this is where you need to focus, other than jewelry, artistic work, shares, securities, and immovable property in the balance sheet. So the meaning of A is pick up book value of all the assets which are given in the balance sheet of the company on the valuation date, other than the jewelry, artistic work, shares, securities एंड इमोवेबल प्रॉपर्टी. तो ये आइटम्स को छोड़ के बाकी के जो बैलेंस शीट में आइटम हैं आप उनको पिकअप करिए एंड रिड्यूस देम एज रिड्यूस्ड बाय these two items. And what these two items are? These two items are: number one, any amount of income tax paid, if any, less the amount of income tax refund claimed, if any. So आप क्या करेंगे, आप जो भी बाकी की एसेट्स हैं, लैंड है, बिल्डिंग है, प्रॉपर्टी प्लांट एंड इक्विपमेंट है, कंप्यूटर है, फर्नीचर है, वो सारे एसेट्स को आप ले लेंगे जो, और उनकी जो बुक वैल्यू दी है बैलेंस शीट में उसको ले लेंगे. लेकिन जो ज्वेलरी है, आर्टिस्टिक वर्क है, शेयर्स है, सिक्योरिटीज़ है, इमोबाइल प्रॉपर्टी है, इनको, इनकी वैल्यू आप जो बैलेंस शीट में दी है वो नहीं लेंगे. क्यों? इनकी वैल्यू आपको अलग से डिराइव करनी पड़ेगी. एंड वो अलग से कैसे ड्राइव करेंगे हम लोग अभी आगे बढ़ेंगे तब समझेंगे. पर फॉर द मोमेंट जस्ट अंडरस्टैंड कि अदर देन ज्वेलरी, आर्टिस्टिक वर्क, शेयर, सिक्योरिटीज एंड इमोवेबल प्रॉपर्टी, all the other assets which are appearing in your balance sheet, pick up those assets and take their values as they are given in the balance sheet and minus from the total of that amount in if any amount of income tax paid less by the amount of income tax claimed. That's number one. And number two, any amount shown in the balance sheet as unamortized amount of deferred expenditure. तो यानी कि अगर आपकी बैलेंस शीट में कोई अमाउंट अपीयर हो रही है एज deferred revenue expenditure, and I'm sure all of you will know as to what is deferred revenue expenditure. So deferred revenue expenditure is many times companies spend sizable money on sales promotion, and sizable amount is spent on the sales promotion or launch of the products of the company, and this amount is supposed to be benefiting the company over the years. So therefore, instead of charging this amount as the revenue expense, what companies would do is to show this expenditure as a capital item in the balance sheet under the head deferred revenue expenditure. So और इसको क्या करते हैं, इस खर्चे को over the years you keep on writing off in systematic plan. तो अगर ऐसी कोई अमाउंट आपके बैलेंस शीट में है तो ये जो इनकम टैक्स का जो फिगर है और ये जो दोनों अमाउंट हैं, ये दोनों अमाउंट आप क्या करोगे, जो बुक वैल्यू है ऑफ ऑल द अदर एसेट्स उसमें से माइनस करोगे. एंड दैट इज योर पॉइंट नंबर ए. व्हाट इज योर पॉइंट नंबर बी? पॉइंट नंबर बी इज the price which the jewelry and the artistic work would fetch if sold in the open market on the basis of valuation report obtained from a registered valuer. And remember, registered valuer का यहाँ पर क्या मतलब है? Registered valuer का यहाँ पर मतलब है person who is registered under the provisions of Wealth Tax Act, and the person who is registered as a valuer under the provisions of Wealth Tax Act, the same person is recognized as registered valuer under the income tax also. तो अब आपको क्या करना है, अगर कंपनी के पास में या जो जिसका भी आप वैल्यूएशन करना चाह रहे हैं उसकी बैलेंस शीट में ज्वेलरी एंड आर्टिस्टिक वर्क है, तो जो पूजा ने जो सवाल पूछा था, तो अब जो नई डेट आ गई, तो अब जो पुराने वाला जो आपका इन्वॉइस था वो उससे काम नहीं चलेगा. अब ज्वेलरी और आर्टिस्टिक वर्क का आपको वैल्यूएशन दोबारा से करना पड़ेगा. दैट मीन्स यू विल नीड टू गो टू अ रजिस्टर्ड वैल्यूअर, और रजिस्टर्ड वैल्यूअर से आपको इसका वैल्यूएशन लेना पड़ेगा. कहने का मतलब क्या है? कहने का मतलब ये है कि जो ज्वेलरी और आर्टिस्टिक वर्क की जो बुक वैल्यू बैलेंस शीट में है उसको आपको इग्नोर करना होगा और उसकी जगह पे आपको नई वैल्यू लेनी होगी. और वो वैल्यू कौन सी होगी? दैट इज द वैल्यू विच इज गिवन बाय द रजिस्टर्ड वैल्यूअर, एंड दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ B in this formula as per rule 11UA1 small c small b. Then you have C. What is the meaning of C? The meaning of C is fair market value of shares and securities as determined provided in this rule. तो आपको क्या करना है, जो शेयर एंड सिक्योरिटीज जो कंपनी की बैलेंस शीट में अपीयर हो रही हैं, तो उस जो जिस वैल्यू पे these shares and the securities are appearing in the balance sheet of the person for whom you are trying to do the valuation, or the company for whom you are trying to do the evaluation, that figure which is appearing in the balance sheet will need to be ignored. Instead of that, new value will need to be, new fair market value will need to found out of the shares and securities as per this rule, as we discussed little while ago. Then you have a item D, and the what is the meaning of item D? Meaning of item D is the value adopted or assessed or assessable. So item D, remember, is for the purpose of immovable property. अब देखिए आप क्या करना चाह रहे हैं. As per rule 11UA1 small c small b, what you are trying to find out? You are trying to find out valuation of unquoted equity share. So जब आप valuation, when you are trying to find out valuation of unquoted equity share, so अब आपको ये जो कंपनी की बैलेंस शीट में अगर कोई इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी है, तो वो जो इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी की बैलेंस शीट में जो वैल्यू है उसको इग्नोर करना होगा और उसकी जगह आपको नई वैल्यू लेनी होगी फॉर द इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी. एंड वेयर विल यू गेट दैट न्यू वैल्यू फॉर द इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टी? You will get that new value for the immovable property from any authority of the government for the purpose of payment of stamp duty. यानी कि as per the Stamps Act के हिसाब से ये जो immovable property है for the purpose of stamp duty, इसकी कितनी value होती है, you will take value of the immovable property accordingly, and that is the meaning of point number, that is the meaning of D that you have in this formula. I hope this makes sense to everyone.
Sir.
Okay, Dinesh, very good. Pooja.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Baman.
क्वेश्चन है
हाँ.
क्वेश्चन है
Please.
जैसे कुछ शेयर सर, जैसे कुछ शेयर्स हैं
हाँ.
कहीं अगर जैसे एसबीआई का ही शेयर हम लेके चले, वो एनएससी में भी रजिस्टर्ड है और वो बीएससी में भी रजिस्टर्ड है.
हाँ हाँ.
तो सर उसकी फिर वैल्यू हम कैसे निकाल सकते हैं जो जहाँ पे ज्यादा ट्रेडिंग होती है उसमें?
Exactly. So on the valuation date, उस शेयर की जिस एक्सचेंज पे ज़्यादा क्वांटिटी ट्रेड हुई होगी, the quoted price at that exchange will be used for the purpose of valuation. Yes, Pooja, does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, so let us move further, and now we come to the item L. So what is the meaning of L? And this is again we have to be very attentive here. L का मतलब है book value of liabilities shown in the balance sheet but not including the following. इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब ये है कि सीधी सी बात है, देखो मोटा मोटा बात करें तो अगर मोटी मोटी बात करें तो ये इसका जो फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल है ऑफ वैल्यूएशन ऑफ अनकोटेड शेयर एज पर रूल 11UA सब रूल 1 स्मॉल c स्मॉल b. तो व्हाट इज द फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल? द फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल इज एसेट्स minus liabilities. That is the fundamental principle. The only change is that in case of the assets, there are certain assets whose value can be taken as given in the books, and there are certain assets whose value can be taken not as given in the books, but those values will need to be separately ascertained because those values are supposed to have undergone a change since the time they were reported in the books of the company. And liabilities, so obviously you are trying to find the value of the shares of the company. So what is the value of the shares of the company? Really speaking, value of the shares of the company is total of the assets minus external liabilities. So since the word used here is the liability, and therefore just to make clear that book value of the liabilities but not including the following. And which are these following? These followings, as we will see, are nothing but your equity share capital or your capital of the shareholders or shareholders fund as we typically understand. And so A plus B plus C plus D minus L. L का मतलब क्या है? L का मतलब है liabilities. Liabilities मतलब कौन सी? सारी liabilities नहीं, not all the liabilities which are given in the balance sheet. All the liabilities given in the balance sheet excluding what? Excluding number 1, पेड अप कैपिटल. सो पेड अप कैपिटल को आप माइनस नहीं करोगे फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ डिटरमिनिंग फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ अनकोटेड इक्विटी शेयर एज पर रूल 11 यू ए सब रूल 1 स्मॉल सी स्मॉल बी. यानी कि पेड अप कैपिटल you will not exclude, and we understand as to why the paid up share capital has not to be excluded, because ultimately when we want to calculate the net worth of a business, how do we calculate the net worth of the business? We calculate the net worth of the business either by taking total of shareholders funds, or we calculate the net worth by taking all the total assets of the company minus external liabilities, which is non-current liabilities plus the current liabilities. So obviously what is not being deducted here is the equity, and same is the case in this rule 11 UA 1C 1B. तो पेड अप कैपिटल को आप माइनस नहीं करेंगे. नंबर 2, the amount set apart for payment of dividend on preference shares and equity shares where such dividends have not been declared before the date of transfer at a general body meeting of the company. तो यानी कि अगर कोई अमाउंट है पेमेंट ऑफ डिविडेंड which has not been declared before the date of transfer at the general body meeting. So please remember, unless and until a dividend is declared at the shareholders meeting, it does not become liability of the company. It becomes liability of the company only when it is declared at the shareholders meeting, and therefore any such dividend will also not to be deducted as liability. I only have a doubt here which perhaps needs correction, and that is, as far as the preference shares are concerned, preference shares, the dividend is not to be declared on preference shares in the shareholders meeting, because dividend in case of the preference share capital is a contracted obligation of the company to pay, especially when the company is making profit. So therefore, in my view, dividend in respect of preference share capital, in my view, will still need to be deducted, unlike the dividend on the equity share capital, which is not yet declared. As regards the dividend on the equity share capital, it is understood it is not to be deducted from the total of the assets, that is A plus B plus C plus D. But as far as the dividend on the preference share capital is concerned, if the company is earning profit, then of course payment of the dividend becomes a liability, and in my view it should be deducted. But that is a point of debate. One will have to take it up with the tax authorities and explain to them as to why this dividend on the preference share capital has to be deducted for the purpose of determining the fair market value of unquoted share as per rule 11 UA sub rule 1 small c and small b. Reserves and surplus will also not to be deducted, and I'm sure all of us understand, because why the reserves and surplus are not to be deducted, because what the reserves and surplus are nothing but part of the shareholders capital. They are part of the shareholders funds, and therefore reserves and surplus also will not be deducted from A plus B plus C plus D when you're deducting the liabilities. Number 4, any amount representing provision for taxation other than amount of income tax paid, if any, less amount of income tax claimed as refund, if any, to the extent of the excess over the tax payable with reference to the book profits in accordance with the laws applicable, this also will not be deducted, which of course can be understood. Number 5, any amount representing provisions made for meeting liabilities other than ascertained liabilities. इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब यह है कि if a company has made provisions for ascertained liabilities, then that amount of liability or that amount of provision can be deducted from the total of A plus B plus C plus D as part of the L. But if there are provisions which are made and which are not ascertained, that means there is no base for those provisions, then such provisions will not be deducted as part of the liability from the total of A plus B plus C plus D. And finally, point number 6, any amount representing contingent liability also will not to be deducted. And obviously contingent liability is not a liability as yet. It's not a frozen liability. It's not a liability which has devolved on the company. And therefore, it obviously does not have to be deducted as part of your L in the formula of A plus B plus C plus D. And that's your minus. Now, what is the PB stands for? PB stands for paid up value of such equity shares. That means the share for which you want to do the valuation. And P का मतलब क्या है? P का मतलब है total amount of paid up equity share capital. So let's say for example, total number of shares of the company are 10,000 and the valuation is to be done for, let's say, 1000 share. So this 1000 is PB. So PB is equal to 1000 and PE is equal to 10,000. That means that is the total paid up capital of the company, and this 1000 is PB, that is the paid up value of such equity shares. Such equity shares का मतलब क्या है? Equity shares of whose valuation is required to be done. So friends, this is how we will use rule 11 UA sub rule 1 small c small b for the purpose of determining fair value of unquoted equity shares.